Well, hey guys, I just wanted to do a quick video about this body armor 4x4 rack. They call it an accessory rack. I believe it's jk-1702. I believe is like their part number on their website or whatever. I just wanted to talk about some of the issues I've had with this rack and setting it up and everything, and just kind of how I overcame some of the issues. Reason I wanted this rack was because on my old Jeep, which is sitting over there, I had actually kind of fabricated my own rack essentially that went on the side of this. And what I did was I took uni strut and attached it up here, and then ran a big magnet, and it would just magnetize on the side of the Jeep here. That's essentially what I did. But with this setup, you know, it's already prefabbed for you and everything, so you don't have to do all that much. But these brackets actually bolt in place, so it actually gives you a little bit more like structure to the overall roof rack, and would, in theory, make sense to me at least, would actually add some more stability and a little bit heavier load rating, so you know, less moving or swaying if you're carrying heavy stuff up there, which I usually am. So that was, you know, one of the primary reasons I really wanted to get this thing. Now, Body Armor currently has an old version roof rack, which is the one I have, and a new version roof rack. When you kind of look at the differences between them, all I really saw was that the old school one has less bolt holes in the roof, like this, than the new one. The new one has bolt holes all over the place, and it has bolt holes specifically for these as well. Like, you know, you got 3 bolt holes, 1, 2, 3, but there's nothing past that. The new one has some up here as well, to add, you know, more accessories or whatever you need, or more crossbars up there. Old school one doesn't actually have that. So so just keep that in mind. I'll get into that in a second. But so one of the issues I ran into mounting this thing was just, I mean, an absolute pain. So I'm going to actually walk around to the other side and kind of show you guys what the bracket looks like without all the stuff attached. So this is what it looks like. And it just, you know, slides underneath there, whatever. Trying to lift up the roof in order to get this thing on is actually quite a pain in the butt, by the way. But when you're reading the instructions, and this is where things get super iffy, right? So if you just think about the overall design of this, these are sliding underneath it, right? Not this, but the brackets. And they are lifting this whole back portion of the roof up. Now, you know, you start to think like, well, what kind of issues is that going to cause with, like, you know, the door, ceiling and stuff like that, for instance, right? So normally you wouldn't be able to do that, but now I can. And you can actually kind of see it. It goes at a slight slant up to where you can't. See what I'm saying? So I was like, ooh, that seems kind of like an issue, you know what I mean, with these brackets and everything. But on top of that, when you're reading the instructions for the hardtop, it wants you to use these really thick spacers. So you put the bracket down, then you put the spacer on top of it, right? So this spacer would go there, there's a center spacer, and then there's the rear spacer. And it essentially would sit like that, as if it was sitting over here. Now, when I had those spacers on there, I mean, this was lifting up the whole hardtop. I mean, such a significant amount. I was like, I don't see how engineering-wise that makes any sense at all, right? So I actually went back online and looked at a couple reviews where a guy was essentially sitting there saying the same thing, like, it doesn't make any sense. So he's like, I ditched the spacers and just ran the brackets, and it seemed to work out a lot better for me. He was saying that he thinks that they might have the hard top and soft top versions, like the directions backwards from each other or something like that. Maybe those spacers are meant for the soft top, not the hard top. I'm not really 100% sure, but I did just like he did, and I ditched the spacers, okay? And it seemed to have worked out pretty good. Now, another issue that I had with getting this was that I was missing tons of parts with this. So because you're lifting this whole thing up, you actually need to have some type of foam seal that goes around the entire thing so that you're, obviously getting a good seal for weatherproofing and to keep the critters out. Mine didn't come with that. So I was like, well, crap. So I decided to run to Lowe's, and then I picked up some weather stripping, used that. It worked pretty good. I installed it way late in the evening towards the nighttime, where I was actually able to take a flashlight and just stick it right here and look to see if there's any light shining in. I did it, all the way around, and I had no issues. I also went and checked, this door. I closed both sides, that door, this door. I poured some water right there just to see if any water would actually start leaking in, and it didn't. So running just the brackets, no sealing issues so far. I haven't actually used this thing in the rain or anything, so consistent downpour might prove to be different. I don't know yet. We'll have to see. But another issue I had too was that the bolt that didn't come with it, I should say, it was missing the bolts that needed to come with it, because you're raising this thing up ever so slightly. You need longer bolts, and it was supposed to come with longer bolts, but the kit didn't come with it. I bought it off eBay, so I had to message the seller and whatnot, and I did call Body Armor 4x4, and guy who answered the phone didn't answer the phone like, hey, this is, Body Armor 4x4. He answered it and said some other weird company name, and I was like, huh? Is this Body Armor 4x4? He's like, oh, yeah. And I was like, okay. And I began telling him, I was like, hey, I'm like missing parts to this or whatever, and he told me the best way to get a hold of him was to go on their website and essentially emailed them and stuff, which, I was kind of like, I'd rather just really talk to somebody about this, because I also have questions about these spacers and stuff, because it's really just not making any sense to me. But I wasn't pretty much able to get a hold of anybody. I mean, they did email me back, but, it's just a pain. It was just an absolute pain. So I did end up getting everything figured out, got them mounted. So, the next part for me was just figuring out what I needed to do getting these things on, because as I mentioned, this is the older style roof rack. So the older style seems to be raised up higher than the new style one is. So there's actually a clearance issue with the whole system. So this is a step, and this step is supposed to go down underneath the bracket like so. Then this, I apologize, these are extremely hot because it's hot today. So if I drop it, that's why. This is supposed to sit, see how it's on there? It's actually supposed to sit flush here, and it's not. So that's obviously an issue in and of itself. So I was like, well, crap, what the heck am I going to do about that? So I was like, okay, I'll just run some washers up into here to close the distance. And I also had to get new bolts that were longer to close the distance. But then I decided, that step's only rated to take 250 pounds. I don't really ever plan on stepping on them to begin with. And I'm over 250 pounds of weight, so I don't really feel comfortable stepping on it. So I was like, heck, what if I just reverse this thing and essentially made it just where it's like a little basket. You can kind of just, throw stuff in here or whatever. So if I'm parked out, wherever camping, I can just, come out, set stuff in here, do whatever I got to do, and not worry about stuff falling off while I'm working on things. It's pretty, convenient in that aspect. So what I ended up doing is, just setting the step on there, and then underneath here, these are really thick washers I picked up. And I just put these washers underneath. I put 3 of them. I only bought 8 because I didn't know how much I was going to end up needing. I was like, okay, I'm going to try 2. 2 didn't work, so I tried 3. 3 did end up working, but I bought a total of 8, so I got to go pick up more for the other side. But it did, in fact, work, and it's stable. I mean, I'm tugging on, it's not even bolted up there, and I'm tugging on it, and it's really good and stable. This one, I'm a little concerned about this one because it does not actually sit flush up there. I'm wondering if I pull away one washer, if that'll make a difference. I'm not 100% sure because even setting at Tractor Supply, these washers, like I think you can even see it right there. One's slightly, okay, maybe not these two. There were some that were slightly thicker than others. I could have two of the really thick ones there, and that's causing issues. But yeah, and then I just have to drill a hole right there, and then boom, accessory rack, really cool and everything. But yeah, I just wanted to kind of showcase some of the things I did to kind of combat some of these issues, because Body Armor does a really crappy job of actually explaining like the differences between their old style roof rack and their new style roof rack, and how everything works in conjunction with each other. Because like I said, if you look at a new style one and look at an old style one, they're pretty much identical minus the bolt holes. So if you're someone who doesn't mind doing a little bit of drilling, you think, okay, no big deal, I can use this rack on there. Wrong. This rack sits up, or the roof rack sits up a little too high for this rack to work properly, the way it's supposed to work. But you can, in fact, do a little bit of jury rigging and figure it out. So once I get this thing all installed, I'm going to test it out for a while. It's got like a 3-year warranty on it. So if there's any issues, I can always warranty parts out or anything like that. But the thing that I'm mostly concerned with at this point is just, weather sealing in the future. It might end up changing. Things might end up shifting. Who knows? As well as, so the way this bolted down up here, there's a bolt right here that holds, the back portion of this hardtop in. And it actually sits up quite a bit, and you actually kind of have to hunker, or, bolt it, twist it down, right? So it's kind of like, I feel like there's a little bit of a flex going on with this hardtop. And I'm worried that maybe doing some, hardcore off-roading or something like that, hitting big bumps, is going to end up at some point just causing a big old crack to happen in the middle up there. And that is something that I'm, quite concerned about in the future. And if that does happen, I'm just, going to hit Body Armor up and complain about this product, because, that's kind of a big issue. Looks good and sounds good in theory, but some of the practicalities of it just really don't make sense. A lot of things are just, especially with the spacers. That was the biggest issue for me, was just figuring out these spacers. I just was like, I did not understand what the purpose of these spacers were. And another thing too is, like, I don't take my hardtop off like almost ever, because the way that I usually run my roof rack is I don't actually like to have things sitting up higher than what this is. I actually like them to sit a little bit lower, so I actually run things underneath it. And what I usually run is some uni strut, which I got sitting over there. And it kind of sits right on top of the actual roof itself a little bit. But it kind of almost makes like a little bit of a basket, with this being, the edge of the basket. So, and that's the way I like to run this thing. So, because of the way I run it, there's just no way for me to actually put, or take the hardtop off usually. In order to take the hardtop off, I have to take all the boxes off and the uni strut off. It's just a pain. So, I don't really take the hardtop off. But for people who are taking the hardtop off, this is kind of like one of those things that I'm kind of like, this didn't make any sense to me, because the brackets, let me walk around to the other side. The brackets are only held in by the bolts that hold in the hardtop itself. So if you were to, want to go topless for a while or something, I guess these would hold it in place enough to where you could pull it off and then put the bolts back in or whatever. But to me, I was just like, that's kind of a pain. You know what I mean? Especially if you have stuff mounted on the side and you got to take this hardtop off. You know what I mean? Like, it's just kind of a pain with having this thing just, move back and forth or whatever and stuff. The engineering of this thing kind of just confused the heck out of me. That's kind of one of the things with this rack. So like I said, it looks really good, and I think it's going to add a lot more stability and whatnot. But you know, reason I'm making this video is just to show people like how they can fix this issues if they decide to get this rack and they have an older style roof rack. Or just kind of showing you like maybe this product isn't for you, and maybe it's not as simple, clean cut as, you know, some people might want it to be. So yeah, just keep that in mind, guys. You know, if anything else happens with this rack in the future, I may or may not make a video about it, but we'll see. All right, see you guys.